In today's video, I want to talk about positive personality traits autism brings to a long-term marriage. Now, what if some of the very traits causing tension in your marriage are also the exact traits that could make your relationship extraordinarily stable over time? What if the routines that frustrate you are actually creating security? And what if the blunt honesty that sometimes feels uncomfortable is also protecting your marriage from manipulation, hidden agendas, and emotional games? And what if the autistic brain, when understood correctly, offers something many modern relationships desperately lack: consistency, predictability, reliability, and loyalty? So today, we're going to talk about something that almost nobody discusses honestly: the positive personality traits autism can bring to a long-term marriage. Not in a romanticized way, not in a toxic positivity way, and not pretending that neurodiverse marriage is easy, but in a real, grounded, psychologically accurate way that helps couples stop seeing autism only through a deficit lens. Because once you understand the strengths hidden inside the autistic profile, everything starts to look different. Now, if you're new here, this channel is about helping neurodiverse couples build healthier, more connected marriages through understanding emotional systems and practical strategies. And if you've spent years feeling confused, exhausted, disconnected, or emotionally lonely in your relationship, you're not alone. So let's get into this. I want to talk about the deficit model and why it's incomplete. One of the biggest problems in how autism is discussed online is that almost everything is framed around deficits. Difficulty with emotional expression, difficulty with reading cues, difficulty with flexibility, difficulty with communication. And yes, those struggles can absolutely impact marriage. But here's the issue. When you only study autism through the lens of impairment, you miss the equally important reality. Many autistic traits become powerful long-term relationship assets. In fact, some of the qualities neurotypical spouses initially struggle with are the exact same qualities that often create remarkable relational stability over decades. The problem is that most couples are interpreting autistic behavior through a neurotypical emotional framework. So instead of seeing stability, the neurotypical spouse sees rigidity. Instead of seeing directness, they see insensitivity. Instead of seeing predictability, they see boredom. Instead of seeing loyalty, they see emotional flatness. But underneath those traits is often something profoundly valuable: a nervous system designed around consistency, structure, truthfulness, and reliability. And those qualities matter enormously in long-term marriages. Now, let's talk about how radical honesty removes emotional games. We're going to start with one of the most misunderstood autistic traits: radical honesty. Many autistic individuals have very low tolerance for manipulation, emotional performance, hidden meanings, hidden agenda, passive aggression, social maneuvering, and so on. Now, early in marriage, this can create friction because neurotypical communication often contains layers: subtext, implication, tone shifts, indirect signaling, emotional positioning. But many autistic partners communicate more literally than directly. And while that can sometimes feel blunt, it can also create something incredibly healthy: transparency. There are fewer hidden agendas, far fewer psychological games, far less emotional triangulation. Many neurotypical spouses eventually realize something important after years together. You know what? My autistic spouse may struggle emotionally sometimes, but they are usually exactly who they say they are. And that matters, because in many relationships, instability comes from ambiguity, mixed signals, emotional inconsistency, manipulation, power struggles, mind games. But autistic logic often cuts through all of that, not because the autistic spouse is perfect, but because many autistic nervous systems are fundamentally uncomfortable with social deception. And after 20 or 30 years of marriage, that honesty can become deeply stabilizing. Now let's talk about how loyalty is often exceptionally deep. Another trait that deserves far more attention is loyalty. Many autistic individuals form attachment bonds differently than neurotypical individuals. When they commit, they often commit completely, not performatively, not socially, not emotionally, theatrically, but structurally, systemically. And the neurotypical spouses sometimes miss this because the autistic expression of love may not look emotionally cinematic. It may not always sound romantic. It may not always be verbally expressive, but it often shows up behaviorally: consistency, practically, reliability. He does things for her to show his love. The autistic husband who gets to work every single day for 20 years without fail. Now let's talk about predictable routines and how they create emotional safety. Because routines are often framed negatively in neurodiverse relationships. It's viewed as being rigid, controlling, inflexible. And yes, unmanaged rigidity can absolutely become unhealthy. I'll give you that. But healthy predictability is one of the greatest stabilizers in long-term relationships. Many autistic people naturally create systems, schedules, repeated rituals, reliable patterns. And while neurotypical spouses sometimes initially experience this as restrictive, over time, many realize those systems create security. The bills get paid. The same family traditions happen every year. The routine creates nervous system predictability. And predictability reduces anxiety, especially in long-term partnerships. Now again, balance matters. Routines must not become tyrannical. Flexibility still matters. Emotional attunement still matters. But when couples stop pathologizing every autistic routine and instead ask, okay, well, how can we use this trait constructively? Everything shifts because now the routine becomes an asset instead of an enemy. Now let's talk about hyperfocus and how it can create extraordinary devotion. Another powerful strength is hyperfocus. Now, yes, hyperfocus can absolutely create imbalance when unmanaged, as all these other traits can. But in healthy relationships, it can also generate extraordinary dedication. Many autistic people bring incredible persistence into marriage. When they decide something matters, they often pursue it intensely. And that can show up as deep commitment to providing for the family, relentless problem solving, strong follow-through, consistency under pressure, a willingness to research solutions for hours. And while neurotypical spouses sometimes interpret this problem-solving orientation as emotionally detached, the autistic partner often experiences it as love. They're trying to stabilize the system. They're trying to reduce pain, trying to create order and safety, trying to solve what feels threatening. Once couples understand this difference, resentment often decreases dramatically because now the NT spouse can interpret the behavior more accurately. Instead of, they don't care emotionally, the reframe becomes, this is how their nervous system attempts to protect the relationship. That distinction matters enormously. Now let's talk about logical clarity and how it can improve conflict resolution. One of the hidden gifts many autistic people bring to their marriage is logical clarity. Now, this does not mean autistic individuals are always logical or always correct. Nobody is. But many autistic nervous systems naturally prioritize consistency, accuracy, fairness, and internal logic. And this can become extremely helpful in long-term relationships, especially during conflict. Why? Because logical clarity often reduces emotional manipulation. The conversation becomes less about dominance and more about actual problem solving. Less about winning and more about systems, more about solutions, more about patterns, more about what objectively works. And this is one reason that some neurotypical spouses eventually feel emotionally safer once the relationship matures, because the autistic partner often becomes increasingly predictable over time. The NT spouse learns that they mean what they say. They usually follow consistent rules. They're less socially deceptive. They're less likely to weaponize charm strategically like a narcissist would. Again, not because autistic people are morally superior, but because many autistic brains are simply wired differently around social processing, and that difference can create unusual forms of relational stability. Now, let's talk about the goal of integration, not idealization. I want to say something important here. Strength-based reframing should never become denial. Neurodiverse marriages still require enormous work. Autistic traits can absolutely create pain, loneliness, emotional disconnection, rigidity, shutdowns, misunderstandings, burnout, and so on. And neurotypical spouses should not be pressured into pretending everything is fine when it isn't. But couples also become trapped when they only see autism through a pathological lens, because then every behavior becomes interpreted negatively, and hopelessness grows. Healthy marriages emerge when couples can hold both realities simultaneously. Yes, there are challenges, and yes, there are remarkable strengths. The goal is not pretending that autism is easy. The goal is learning how to build a marriage around accurate understanding instead of chronic misinterpretation. That changes everything. Now, if this video resonated with you, I want you to leave a comment below. What positive autistic trait has actually strengthened your marriage over time? Because I think many couples need permission to finally talk about this honestly. Not through stereotypes, not through shame, but through a balanced understanding of how neurodiverse relationships actually work in real life. And if you're trying to build a healthier neurodiverse marriage, make sure you subscribe. because this channel is designed to help couples move from confusion and resentment to clarity, stability, connection, and real relational growth. I'll see you in the next video. Would you like to schedule a paid private coaching session? This will be in the form of a face-to-face Zoom call. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this Calendly link. If you click on that link, it'll open up my calendar. You can pick the available days and times that works for your schedule. You'll get a follow-up email immediately after purchasing a session that will have the Zoom link that coincides with the day and time that you picked. I will get an email too that you scheduled a session, and I will be available on that exact day and time, and we will talk. I look forward to working with you. Hey guys, this is Mark. Some of you may not know that I have a lot of books on Amazon. So if you like my videos, you'll like my books. I have several for ASD spouses, for NT spouses, and for the neurodiverse couple. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this link. Feel free to click on that link and see what's available. I'm sure you'll find something that applies to you. So if you're struggling in your neurodiverse marriage, help is available, one click away.